Welcome to Private Midwives' very first podcast. My name is Sharon Gamer. I am a caseload midwife and a midwifery matron here at Private Midwives. My background is that I've always worked in the private sector. I've been a caseload or midwife for about nearly 20 years now. I'm very excited today to introduce my guest, who is a very charismatic and down-to-earth guy who loves keeping it real. He's a midwife, author, and founder of the wonderful Birthing for Blokes, Mr. Mark Harris. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, Sharon. How are you?
Fine. How are you? You
I'm
enjoying
all
the
right.
sunshine?
I am enjoying the sunshine. Yeah, went to Seaside yesterday. Had a lovely time with all the most of the grandchildren, so that was great.
Did you get in the water?
No, I didn't. Although it was warm enough, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really lovely yesterday.
It was nice to have a lot of the grandchildren there. See them quite regularly, but it's rare that I see a lot of them at once. And there's 13 of them, so there's a lot to see.
Today, I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, I want to bring forward about your books and all that kind of stuff, but I wanted to start kind of at the beginning, and I wanted to ask you about how a former kitchen salesman
Yeah.
decides to go a completely different path, become a midwife. I mean, what drove you to do that? How did that happen? Talk me through
Well,
it.
you've done your research, haven't you? I was a kitchen salesman and then worked in the building
Yeah, I saw that you
merchants
were a
and
labourer
stuff
as
like
well.
that. Yeah. Well, I got to the point in my young-ish life that it was a bit of an existential crisis, I suppose. I realized that I was living pretty much for the weekend because I hated the work that I was doing.
Right.
And I ended up feeling like there must be more to life than that. I wasn't driven by any financial ambitions or anything like that. And way back then, I decided I wanted to do a job that made a contribution in some way, that was in some way helping or serving. And that's when I did the General Nurse Council test in 1988, which you can't do anymore. And because I got no qualifications whatsoever at school, I got kicked out at 15. And then, so I did the test and did remarkably well. I was expecting only to be able to do SEN nursing, if you
Oh, right.
remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
But I did well enough to do SRN. I did state registered nurse qualification. I loved the training very, very much because I enjoyed hands-on washing, cleaning. I loved the nursing process
yeah.
and all of that. And then I qualified and I was suddenly being pulled in the direction of kind of middle management.
Yeah.
And I thought it's not what I came into nursing for. And a mate of mine at the time, who I trained with as a nurse, was the first male midwife ever in Warwickshire. He rang me up and he knew that I had 5 children, uh, 3 children at this stage, and I was really frustrated with nursing. And he knew that. And he rang me up and he said, Mark, midwife, it's a verb, not a noun. And I said, well, what you on about, Dave? He said, no, it's a verb. I said, explain yourself. He said, midwife comes from the Middle English, mid to be with, and wife, woman, to be with woman. He said, it's who you're being when you're with a woman. It's not a gender thing. In fact, it's not a person, place, or thing at all. It's who you're being. You can't be a midwife without being with a woman. And what he was trying to communicate to me was saying, look, if you train as a midwife, you'll never get pulled away from the people you're meant to be working with. Now, it turns out you do, right, Sharon?
Yeah, absolutely. I was
Uh,
going to say,
yeah, but I got
I
the
think
idea of it and I applied in Leicester, second male ever. Professor Dennis Walsh was the first,
yeah.
and there's never been a third, as far as I'm aware. And I fell in love with the whole thing.
Did you do the 18-month sort of, you did it that way? Yeah.
I
So you,
did. I was the first cohort in Leicester to do the 18-month diploma.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Never to go back to labouring or doing kitchens. Hey.
No, it was a relief.
So did you always work in the NHS? I seem to have a memory in my mind that you were an independent midwife at some
Oh,
point.
for a little while, I worked independently, and then I worked with Private Midwives for a very short period
Yeah.
after I did a return to practice. But we're talking many years ago.
But clinically, as a midwife, you were a midwife for about 20 years, weren't you?
Clinically, in the NHS directly, 17. After that, my first wife died around about, very difficult to remember the exact times. Just before my wife died, I'd left the NHS and I was actually working in youth work. And
All
then
right.
after she died, I reevaluated and decided what I want to really do with the rest of my life now she wasn't here. And midwifery was where my heart was. So I did a return to practice, even though I didn't officially need to. Then I went and did agency midwifery for a while with Pulse. And then I got another clinical job in Coventry. So I did a block of about 15, 16 years. Then I did another block where I worked in Coventry Hospital on the labour ward. And then I was in the community for a time.
So I'm thinking about, where the path took you and how it led you to writing your first book.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to imagine, is that because of what you saw? Your lovely book, Men, Love and Birth, the first book. Where did the inspiration for that come? Was it because you were seeing men in these awkward situations, or, as we all do as midwives, seeing these poor fellas in a room just like not knowing what to do with themselves? I'd love to explore that a little bit.
Yeah. I think the inspiration, as you said, came from seeing men. The vast majority whom I saw appeared as though they were like fish out of water. And don't forget, as a midwife and as a father of 5 biological children, I've got 8 children, but 5 biological ones, that I was present for each of the birth. The first 2 of those babies being born, I felt similarly. I was a student midwife for the others and then a midwife for the last one. So seeing men in the birth room not really knowing how to respond. So I'd spent my career watching that. Then I started to study and become really interested in evolutionary biology. And I'd already been exposed to the ideas around the limbic system and the amygdala system in a woman being so responsible for the birthing process flowing and
Yeah,
completing. And we all know about oxytocin and its importance in the birthing process, and how the neocortex, which is the young kid in the block, if the
yeah,
neocortex gets involved through questioning and whatever, it inhibits this oxytocin release, which inhibits birthing process, actually puts women at risk after the
yeah,
baby's born and we're waiting for the placenta. It's not
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
time to put the
Mm,
lights on, right? It's not the
absolutely.
time. It's not the time to be asking loads of questions, and there's still settling needs going on, right?
Yeah, taking the baby away. Well, we need to weigh the baby.
What are
We
you
need to dry
doing?
the baby. We need, yeah,
What are
what
you
are you
doing?
doing?
I mean, this is why, when the baby's feeding at the breast, it's releasing the hormones that are going to be responsible for causing the living ligatures to do their job, right? So important. But anyway, so I was learning about all the amygdala and the limbic system and how it's millions of years old, and every woman on the planet has to have come from a long line of effectively birthing women, because if they didn't, we wouldn't be here.
Excellent.
And I was learning about this and I was thinking, isn't it interesting that I celebrate the evolutionary heritage of woman to birth humankind? I acknowledge it is an automatic process that is ancient. And once her neocortex is out of the way, it just does its work, right?
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
celebrate that, right?
absolutely.
And we say what's going on. I would say the birthing environment has been created by a masculine way of seeing the world. So we've got these hospital environments that by and large historically created by men. So let's measure this process that can't be measured. We'll get a partogram and a cardiotachograph, and we'll have a few gadgets, please, to save the day.
And put
So
everybody's mind at rest.
to give the illusion of controlling an event that can't be controlled. And we'll
Absolutely.
do regular vaginal examinations to measure progress, when progress is so unique to the individual that no amount of vaginal examinations will tell you squat,
No,
right? So
absolutely.
we've got these masculine infused institutions, and a woman is kind of gives birth in them in spite of them. They're not facilitating the process. It's in spite of that stuff
Yeah,
that she is still able to lose herself to the hormones and give birth. It's a powerful ancient process. And I thought, we've not given any thought to the fact that the same process is going on in him. There is a hormonal response in him that is rooted in the limbic and the amygdala system, not in the same way linked to his biological reproduction. So I'm not suggesting that. But still, in that moment, from an ancient perspective, he would have either been fighting or fleeing or freezing, because his responsibility as the male of our species would have been to guard the birth space, to guard his progeny. And now what we see in the birth room is that men are put into a position where they are effectively given pretty much nothing to do. You know, often the men I've spoke to say they feel sidelined. And then what happens is they have this amygdala response, and the behaviors that I used to see every day, are men responding to the stress with habitual patterns of handling stress. So, you know, you have one man whose partner is birthing and he's watching a series on his iPad. You know, is he an arsehole? No, he's responding to these powerful anxiety feelings and withdrawing.
I've seen it. And it initially, when you first see it, it's like mind blowing, because you're right. In the beginning, you do sit there and you think, is he just like an asshole? You know, she's there, she's going through this whole process. One of the ones I saw, and he was coming up with his mobile phone to her face saying, "What about this one?" And he was looking for car insurance. He was trying to look for car insurance. I know there's the famous ones from One Born Every Minute, like with the guy blowing up, gloves and playing around with the gloves while the woman's, so we see this, don't we, all the time? But recognizing that is.
And Robbie Williams, you know, when his baby was born, dancing around, filming it all. So I began to see that those responses to the stressor were rooted in the men's past behaviors of handling stress. I mean, I had one guy who headbutted the pediatrician, and we had to call the police. You know, now he probably was a violent so-and-so, but what we were seeing were historic patterns of handling conflict and apparent stress in the body. I felt that there was some pregnancy and birth in particular preparation that needed to be given to men that explained these processes, and that explained that if, first of all, they were able to control this ancient process, you know, that isn't their fault, inverted commas, but is a natural response, some level of control. And if they were to focus on their partner perceiving that they are there completely for them. So the whole goal of the process is to be present for her. So all of the birth information is an aside, because it's not that important. So long as he gets that being truly present in the room will create potentially the space for her to birth into.
So when you talk about this in the book, I know that you talk about the aim is so that men can be present with the women versus participating.
It's not either or. It's really just highlighting one as a priority. You see, what I wouldn't want a partner to get preoccupied with doing, because the male of our species will have a tendency to retreat into that.
It's really interesting what you're saying, because I remember I was talking to the great Mary Cronk once. She was talking about this. She was talking about how she was really old school, as you know, and she was talking more about how men's behavior in labor and that how it annoyed her and the things that she did to combat that sort of stuff. And she told me a story of this guy who was really agitated. He was like moving around, and he kept going off and coming back. The woman would call him back, and what are you doing? And the woman was getting stressed, and the labor was like stalling and then starting again. And obviously you could see from a midwifery point of view, she could see how it was interfering with the process. And she said, she got an in-out catheter or something, or an NG tube. And she just took it out of its wrappings, and she said she gave it to him. And she said, I need you to hold that. I'm going to need it. And I need you to be here ready to give it to me when I need it. And she said that, she went on, and this woman went on to birth her baby beautifully in the pool and everything else. And he didn't move again. He was there. He held her hand with one hand and he held this tube with the other. He didn't move again at all. And she remembers that, like, obviously the birth happened and everything else, and it was all wonderful, and he's gone in for a cuddle and all this sort of stuff. And then he said, oh, I've got this. Do you need this? No, I don't need it now. But she said it was just that it kept him focused. It kept him,
How
he had
wise.
something important to do. How wise was that? And I've
Brilliant.
used similar. I've taken on board what she said, and when I've had a situation with an agitated dad or something, I've practiced similar. I've put things in place that had a similar effect, and it works. It actually
That,
works if you can give them a focus. It really works.
that
It
blows my head away, Mary Cronk. I mean, you'd expect
oh
it, I suppose, from a amazing woman.
yeah,
But she's hit
very.
the nail on the head, isn't she? We don't want, let's be honest. Michel O'Donnell said years and years and years, and I consider him a friend. We've spoken before, and he said years and years ago that men should not be in the birth room. That ultimate, although he used to be in the birth room a lot. I mean, I hope that
I
hasn't
was going to
escaped
say,
everyone's attention. But anyway,
with half his clothes off, if I remember
yeah,
rightly.
all right. Oh, matron. Anyway, he said men's role is to protect the birth space, give him something to do outside the room. And from an evolutionary biological perspective, I get that. Why I left midwifery after 17 odd years, I left for a short period, but because I was having issues with the idea that a woman who had suffered at the hands of sexual violence, those that talk about it are the tip of the iceberg. And the idea that a woman I was looking after felt so lacking in power that they could say no to me, I found that too hard to handle at one point. Even
Oh,
though I had this really rigorous consenting thing where the staff weren't, they had to tell the woman that I was a man before I met them. Are you happy in principle? And then I would go in the room, spend 20 minutes, and then I would say again, after they realized I was nearly 26 stone and all that. So after 20 minutes, I'd say, look, it'd be a privilege for me to look after you, but it's completely your choice. And if you say no at this point, I won't be offended. I won't take it personally. So I used to do all of that, but I still felt that a male in that place didn't belong. I didn't belong.
yeah, no, I get
Even
it.
though I felt that I was doing as good a job as at least half of my colleagues who were female around me, I always felt that the very best intuitive midwives are women, and that as a man, I didn't feel like I belonged. So
Do you
in
feel that
that,
that's possibly because you can't possibly
of
experience
course,
what they're experiencing?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. I would go as far as to say that as a man, I'm experiencing the world through a masculine neurophysiology. I
yeah,
can do so no other way. So what that means is a woman experiencing the world through a female neurophysiology has intuitions that I don't even have access to,
yeah.
right?
The doors aren't
Yeah,
even there, let alone being open.
exactly. I don't even have it as a possibility for an intuition. So, yeah, I think there must be some endocrine balance sliding scale because I was able to work as a midwife and do a fairly good job. But yeah, anyway, so I got to that point, and part of me says, I think Michel Adon's is right that from a nomadic people's point of view, through a long evolutionary history, the male of the species wouldn't have been in the room. We became biped. Birth became more difficult because of the attitude of the pelvis and the rest of it. And we needed someone else with us. And that someone else with us was another female of the species. So even though my mate said it's a verb, not a noun, and therefore not gender specific, historically it's very gender specific. And I think the evidence would suggest that Michel O'Donnell is probably right in saying it's best to be an all-female environment. But in the 70s, with the advent of the Peel report in 71
Yeah,
and the march towards warehouse type birth services provision in hospitals, so we've got 100% hospital confinement recommendation. We've got families becoming nuclear, not connected to an extended network. And we've got women being asked to go into hospital and wanting someone with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the obligation started to be, it became almost you were obliged, if you were a partner, to be in the room.
See, it's that's really interesting because like I've thought about this. I've thought about the change and how it happened and how it evolved. And my perception, or I think whether it's a perception or whether my belief is that I feel it was more born from women becoming stronger and being able to say, no, you put me in this state, you're actually going to be there and watch me go through it. And
Uh,
I mean, that's just my perception of what
Maybe I
I
know, mate. Maybe that's part of it. And when we talk about the implications of societal changes on behaviors, it's never one thing, is it?
no,
But,
no, no.
but definitely there was this declining of the nuclear family. There was the Peel report in 71, which said the home birth weight went through the floor, didn't it? Post that.
Yeah.
So women were going into hospital, the nuclear family was shifting, and men were being asked into the birth room. Now, it could have been an upsurge of autonomy in women saying, look, you're going to go through this with me. You're not going to sit out there smoking cigars or whatever the old fashioned that might have played into it.
Yeah.
But now we've got men in the birth room, and there is a significant number of them that won't tell anyone, but they don't want to be there.
Oh, I'm sure most of them don't. Yeah. I mean,
In fact, the first words in the book are you have to make a very clear,
yeah,
conscious choice that you're there because you want to be.
to be
And if
there.
you
Yeah.
don't want to be, the fact that you don't want to be will be communicating to her, not with your words, but with the unconscious signals that every human being gives off. So we can say one thing, but our body and the signs and signals coming off our body will say another, and she will pick it up at an unconscious level, and then she'll be focused on mothering you instead of losing herself to the pregnancy hormones that have served women for millions of years.
It's fascinating. All of it's really fascinating. So when you started to write the book, obviously you've got all this in your mind, and that's your inspiration. That's what starts. That's what sets it off. For those who haven't read the book, talk a little bit about where you come from in the book, because I know that there are tips and ideas for
Yeah.
men on how to sort of like appropriately get through these times and everything
Yeah.
else.
What started it all off is I spoke at a Doula UK conference, and Pinter and Martin were there, and they asked me to write the book. So I'd
Right.
never thought about writing a book until they asked me. And the truth of it is, I spent 2 years trying to write a book, and I couldn't do it because I was thinking, well, if I say that, they're not going to be happy. And if I say that,
Oh,
they're
I
not
know.
going to be happy. And I
The
just couldn't write.
minefield.
I just couldn't write it. And what style do I write it in and all of that? And then I just gave up, and I said, right, I'm going to write the book that I want my sons and grandsons to have in their hands, like everything dad and granddad says about being a man and being there for a partner.
Yeah.
And the book came out in 6 weeks. And
Wow.
it came out as a part imaginary dad's group. And all of the dads in the group are either one of my sons or my grandsons. That's the names in the book.
Oh,
And
wow.
and that's how it came about. I wanted to let the boys in my family, the men in my family, have everything that I felt was important about them being really present for their partners. And
Yeah.
and that's how it came out. Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, well, I was an independent midwife for years, and then I started working with private midwives and been with them for quite a while now. Obviously, sometimes you take on a client who has either had a traumatic experience before or just wants a debrief from their experience before. And what struck me, I've always done that. I've always requested the previous notes so that I can, read the story, read their birth story, And what struck me was that the partners, the men, they're very rarely ever even mentioned in the notes.
No.
This is back when they were still writing in the notes. And that struck me really early on, actually. So I've always made sure that in my documentation, I always mention, even if he's making her a cup of tea and a bit of toast, I write in there that he's
Mm.
there because this is their birth story. But over the years, what I've done is I've picked things like with my birth talk and the preparation chat that we have. We do a lot of educational stuff, obviously, all the way through. But at 36 weeks, we do that sitting down. And one of the tips that I give, because it's things that I've seen where women get so frustrated, is when the baby's born and it's all lovely and they've had their like golden hour and everything, and then you're thinking, right, we've got to do some prep stuff. And so now you say to him, right, go and get her big pants and go and get her a nappy or something, and off he does toddle, and then he comes back and he's like, well, where is that? And she says, well, in the bag in the
Yeah.
bin. And so off he goes, and then he comes back again. He says, no, it's not in there. And she's like, yes, it is. And so that breaks that beautiful, like, because she's getting
Yeah.
frustrated. So one of the tips that I do, I don't know about other midwives, is that I always say to the woman, you get everything you want for the birth bag, everything for the
Yeah.
hospital bag, for the baby bag, and everything you want to go in it, and you lay it all out on the bed. And then
Yeah.
you get him to pack the bag. So
Brilliant.
he packs the bag, because
That's
then
brilliant.
when I'm saying to him, can you go and get me a big pants and a pad or this or whatever, he knows exactly where it is because he packed it. Little things like that, I think help to bring him in
Yeah.
and for him to be present, but also participate in.
Yeah,
So
I love the insight and the experience that that's based on. The fact that you've seen there being this connection, and then it was kind of not ruined, but broken
broken or
momentarily.
fractured a little
But
bit, yeah.
yeah, I think that's lovely. And the exercises in the book, being honest, are designed for him to have an experience of a feeling of connection. Now, hopefully, he's already had an experience of that because he's in love with her. But I want him to have an experience of being able to create a connection with her willfully. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is why I say to them, pick a job around the house that needs doing, do it without being asked and without looking for praise. And when I
Yeah.
used to do these live with people, and they come back the next week and they say that was remarkable, there was such a difference that it made in their partner when they looked for a job that need doing, did it, didn't mention that they'd done it, and didn't look for praise. It was quite remarkable. So, but the idea was for them to have an experience of what it meant when there was a deepening connection, because that's what I'm asking them to focus on when they're in the birth room. Are you in a felt sense of connection with her? That's the only goal you've got, is to maintain that.
To close I talk about the triangle because like there's
Yeah.
three now. Before that they do feel
Nice.
they feel a bit disconnected, don't they? They're like, there's this circle, there's this nucleus in the middle, and then they're like a satellite on the outside for a
Yeah.
while.
I love
If
that
they
close the triangle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you try, bringing them in and participating like that, actually, I talk about closing the triangle, and that's them
Yeah.
now formed. And I think that's fabulous. I think that's like, it really enhances that, because we see, let's face it, I think everybody should read your book, by the way, but
Oh, thank you.
I think all men out there should read the book, but women too. I enjoyed it myself. Like, it's fun.
Thank you.
It's definitely, now that I know you, obviously we've spoken before, and we've got to know each other over the last few months. You exude off of the pages, so I think that's like it.
Thank you.
That's yeah. I think it's a great book for everybody. I did read. I mean, I know at the moment. I want to talk about the fact that you did go on to do Men, Love, and Fatherhood. I mean, when did that come about?
Well, the Men, Love, and Fatherhood never happened. I did have a contract for it, but it never happened. But what we are thinking of doing next year is a new edition
Yes, I
of Men,
mean,
Love, and Birth. But the new edition is going to have 3 or 4 more chapters. So the chapters that I'm working on at the moment, and these are working titles. So language power in the
the
birth room.
language.
Yeah. Sex after pregnancy, the early days and weeks at home,
Yeah,
an extended chapter on physiology of lactation
yeah,
and supporting the breastfeeding process, and maybe a chapter on, and this wording is horrible, so it won't be this, a title on reducing the chances of a woman perceiving her birth as traumatic. But obviously,
Yeah.
that's not going to be the chapter, but that's the intent of the chapter.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's great to touch on the breastfeeding, especially from a male perspective, because how many times do we see so many men again, they've closed that triangle, if you like, but then all of a sudden they feel outside of it again because only,
Yeah.
mum has got that, she's the woman with the baby, she's feeding, she's, giving all the nutrients. That's his, he's supposed to
Yeah.
provide and all that kind of stuff, and how that makes them feel. And how many times do we see that they then sort of, maybe subconsciously, they then sort of niggle and niggle and niggle at them until the women
Yeah.
are given, bottle so that dad can do it or partner can do it
Yeah. We've got the lowest breastfeeding rates at 12 months in the world.
in the world. That's
At
crazy.
12 months. So we're talking about 12 months, the lowest in the world. And there's stuff in the new book that I'm working on. It's an area that we don't discuss, and it's the breasts as part of the intimate process of sex,
Yeah, and sexual
and
objects.
yeah, the whole thing.
Mm.
And we're going to talk about that in the book. Yeah, but it's not something that gets talked about that much.
No, no, not at all. I think obviously with National Breastfeeding Month coming up, I'm actually doing some radio interviews actually around this subject. And we at Private Midwives did our own research that's been out there now, and we just got our results in, and we've been looking at people's perceptions of breastfeeding, people's perceptions of breastfeeding in public, and that kind of stuff. So we're going to be talking about that. And I'll probably then, after that's all been done, I'll probably will do another podcast actually and looking at the results, because at Private Midwives, our breastfeeding rates, as you can imagine, are phenomenal because we
Yeah.
have that luxury of time. We have that luxury to be able to be with a woman afterwards. We can be with her daily if she needs it. We can
Mm.
spend the time with her and help her through the different changes and everything that happen over those first few days. I mean, you and I know a baby's first growth spurt is one of the first points in which a woman will give up breastfeeding if she doesn't have
Yeah.
support, because she thinks,
Yeah.
I haven't got enough. This baby's on me all the time, she hasn't
Yeah.
got enough. So I think giving men an understanding of that, or attempting to do that, I think is fabulous.
Well, yeah, agreed. And I think it takes out this problem that we hear about all the time as NHS midwives, is too many people are giving information
Yeah,
postnatally.
yeah,
He will be a point of contact. He needs to understand that when the placenta is birthed, the placental hormones that have been inhibiting prolactin are still having an effect until 72 hours. They leave the body about 72 hours, and prolactin peaks through the night time.
yeah,
And suddenly a baby that's been settled for, fairly settled, starts to feed like mad through the night time.
yeah,
And that invokes all kinds of worries in the mother. I'm not getting enough. At
yeah.
worst, I've got to get this baby into a routine. God forbid, all of this sort of stuff. So I think just a basic understanding of physiology is important for partners to have. It's important for midwives to have, because I've worked with midwives who I'm quite sure don't understand the physiology of lactation.
Oh,
Otherwise,
absolutely.
they would not be recommending nipple shields or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As a tongue tie practitioner, I often, the way I get the partners' dads involved is by, when we help with a latch. I mean, not even just as a tongue tie practitioner, actually, obviously just as a midwife. When you're in that home with the woman and she's initiating that first breastfeed, if she needs some help and you're there to help and to be on hand, however that would be, I always get them to video. I always get them to take
Oh,
photographs
that's
of
good.
what does the latch look like, because I'm not here all the time. Look
That's
at those
good.
fucking actions, video that's what it should look like. And I often have lots of contact with the dads in those early days, because I think it's so important. This is why I love what you do, because I wholeheartedly believe in it, and I've been practicing it as long as I can remember, getting them to have an understanding, or bringing them part of the process. And I think it makes a huge difference to women and their journey, their breastfeeding journey, even their birthing journey, everything. So I think, adding that sort of stuff into your book. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that it hadn't been published. I knew that it was going to
No,
be.
I couldn't generate enthusiasm for it back then. I went through a real period, me and Dennis Walsh, to be honest, because he's retired and we're best mates. So we
Yeah,
see each other,
yeah,
seeing him the next day. I found it difficult for a while to generate much enthusiasm. And I've got to be honest, my enthusiasm has come back.
good. I'm glad.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. I mean that. I
Yeah,
wouldn't
no,
be doing it.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you can't put everything into it, there's not
Yeah.
we shouldn't
Yeah.
be doing stuff, should we? So
No.
Birthing for Blokes, the
Yeah.
wonderful education program that you run now,
Yeah.
is it based around the book, or
Pre-
has it got separate
no, it is. It's
around the book?
almost solely based around the book. Each of the 6 videos are based on a core chunk of the book. I just produced the videos through setting the camera running and talking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And at the time, I'd spent a lot of time on the book, and each of the videos pretty much follows the themes in the book. There's more stuff, and it's a little bit more punchy because I'm confining myself to 15 minutes per video. There's only 6 of them,
Yeah.
and it doesn't cost anything. It's available for free.
Do you
Um,
not run, well, workshops where you do face-to-face stuff?
nah, not anymore. I
You,
think
yeah,
the
yeah.
apocalypse has ruined me for being
Yeah,
amongst people.
has
Since
it?
COVID, I quite enjoy being home. It's
Yeah.
why all the training I do to birth professionals now, I do based at home. I've only done one live training since COVID happened. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
by the way, Sharon, I want to go back to what you said about photographing and filming the breast. I
Yeah,
think that is so important
yeah,
because it gives the woman and her partner a reference experience for
yeah.
what it should feel and look like. That's at the heart of real deep learning, the ability to make a difference between distinctions. And I think what you're talking about is really powerful. I remember how I learned to estimate blood loss. We had a tutor back in midwifery school back all those years. She would get liquid, a viscous liquid,
Yeah.
add red to it, and she'd get a liter or a pint, whatever it was, and then she would throw it on a white sheet and she'd
Yeah.
make us look at it and she'd say, "That's a liter." And it created an internal reference point so that in future, when I see that amount, something's going on probably outside of consciousness and I'm able to guess the amount quite accurately. And I think using that idea of accelerated learning when teaching about breastfeeding is genius.
I'm a visual learner very much, and so obviously my practices come from a lot of that things that I feel. How many times have you had a woman say, oh, it worked when you were here, it worked when you were here, but then it didn't,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. It came from things like that. So the memory, the muscle memory, even if I've got to, if they ask me to hands on and help and show, say with the tongue tie, that the nipple needs to be flipped up slightly different to how, and gathered up and bunched up, different to the ordinary flipple that most would know about with breastfeeding to help, which just, they pull back, they flatten the areola and get the nipple to point up, and then the baby leads with the chin. The problem is with tongue ties, you actually have to break a lot of the breastfeeding rules to be able to help that baby, you know,
Really?
feed. Absolutely. I mean, I will do something on that. We've got our own course. I've got my own course at Private Midwives. And we're going to be putting that out. But I will do something on it. But it's fascinating to see these things. If a woman feels you touch, and because not all women will want you to do that, and absolutely
Oh,
we respect that, of
yeah.
course. But I do feel that there are, some women do want you to, because they want to remember how it felt, and if you video it and take photographs of it and everything else, you are there almost every time they're trying, because it's
Yeah.
there how you did it, and that's why I do it. But
Can I ask you a question? I don't want to go off theme. And when I was back in 91, junior midwife,
yeah,
caseload bearing, so a lot of time in the community, out of the community, going both ways. I would say we didn't see many tongue tie. Now, do you think that's because we didn't know they were there and they were causing the lot of problems all along? Is that how you account for in recent years tongue ties become very prevalent?
It has.
So
It has.
why? Why do you
Because
think?
women are more informed now. Women will seek help now. Years ago, they wouldn't. Years ago, they would sit and the other female, you talked about, women being around women in that birthing and then post environment. Those women historically would have just had to put up with it. That it's supposed to hurt. That's what it's supposed to be like. And people would just have grinned and bared it, if you like, or they would have just gone to formula. That's how
So
it was done.
got it. So the tongue ties have always been there at a similar prevalence. They've not increased.
100%. I believe so
All
because
right.
when his, you know,
That
I've
makes
sat in
sense.
I've sat in rooms and talked to women about it and sort of like and talked to their mothers, and there was some research being done. There's not a lot of research around tongue tie. There are some pediatricians and doctors that feel that it's fashionable, but actually it's a real issue. It's a real problem. And yeah, so I mean, it's just because women are now more educated, they're out there, they will seek help, they will ask for help, and I think that's why it's more prevalent, that or it feels more prevalent. I think it's always been there, but it's
I
women
mean,
seek.
my question as the undercurrent of that sentiment, is it just fashionable? But I
Yeah,
think now hearing you talk about that, it's always been there. I mean, our rates of breastfeeding haven't changed much since
no.
I've been a midwife.
Seeing a woman go through so much pain and suffering until you come along and you do an assessment, you're looking at the tongue mobility, and you're then if you have to release that restricted frenulum, and then you put the baby on the breast. And Mark, if you could see a woman, I suggest you come to one of the clinics or something one time, and if you see a woman sit there and then she's like, oh my God, I can't feel it. I can't feel it. There's no pain.
That's lovely. Now I'm getting
And it's
goosebumps.
just, yeah, it's the most amazing thing. It can make the biggest amount of difference to a woman's breastfeeding journey. I know that there's lots of stuff out there that and people don't believe in it, and they but
I,
at the end of the day, I see it day in, day out, and I see
yeah,
the
I
difference.
get that. And I'm thinking back to as a community midwife and as a caseload bearing midwife, I think now there'd have been loads of women who I was doing my best to support with different positions, and
Yeah,
who, if I'd have had some understanding and training about tongue tie,
yeah,
it would have improved her experience no end and mine.
yeah,
Because that was just frustration. They were the worst parts of the job for me, was when I was working and working to get it, and
yeah,
then
yeah. And
it
it
was
doesn't,
horrible.
and it's soul destroying when you can't make it work, because you want to make it work, you want to do everything you can, and if it's unsuccessful, you feel that you failed in your role, and there's nothing
Oh,
worse as a
definitely,
midwife, nothing worse as a
definitely.
midwife feeling
Yeah,
that you failed.
and we all know that, the colleagues amongst us that will go in and say, well, if it's not working, top her up. And it will be the path of least resistance, because they can get
Yeah,
in and out,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
it used to make my blood boil. It really did. I was really cross. Let me ask you a follow-up question then. Do you practice, what's the
No,
term?
no,
No.
wound
What?
disruption,
What?
disruption.
No, I'm talking about cutting the tongue tie.
Yeah, so
Oh, what did you
divide.
call it?
I thought you were on about wound disruption. So there are some practices out there. So we absolutely release the frenulum
Yeah.
and create that space under the tongue to allow the baby's mouth to move. We want that to heal, with motion and things like that, rather than. But there are some practices out there where they go in and they disrupt the wound. They get the parents to disrupt it and
Wow.
make sure it doesn't reheal. But I mean, yeah, no, I thought that's what you were talking about. It
No.
gives me the shivers. But
Do
no.
you actually do the cutting of the
Yes, 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 I do. And I train other midwives and health visitors and nurses to do it too. So
right?
yeah, at Private
Excellent.
Midwives, we have our own course that I developed with the support of our lovely head of midwifery there, Linda, who's very supportive of anything sort of furthering our education. As she funded lots of us to come on the birth and awareness, which
Yeah.
I do want to invite you back on another one where we talk
Uh,
about
no
birth
worries.
and dealing with that.
I
But yeah,
don't know. I don't know if many people know that she's Dr. Linda Barclay, and her
yeah,
dissertation
yeah.
was on perineal trauma repair, I think.
Absolutely. She is our go-to perineal woman. She is a Dr. Linda Bryceland. Absolutely.
Yeah.
She's wonderful in that sense, because she really supports us when it comes to, furthering education and that kind of stuff. She's really big into that, and we at Private Midwives facilitate that for all our midwives. I just want to, before we go, I want
Yeah.
to bring something up with you that I know at the moment that you are doing these reaction videos, which I find fabulous and hilarious
Right.
and really funny. But I did see that in an interview that you did about 6 years ago, you said that you feel that dads can feel like spare parts at childbirth. Obviously, you've talked about that, and that you warned them to never watch
Watch.
one book
Yeah.
every minute. That's what
Yeah.
I do. I warn all my clients
Same.
that
I
don't watch
until
that.
look, until I was
And now
doing
you're,
this reaction video is the first time I've ever seen any
yeah. Oh,
ever.
that's good that you're really reacting to them then,
Yeah,
like
because I
as,
couldn't.
as
I
seeing
don't
them.
even watch them beforehand. I just put them on.
They're just
And
not realistic, are they? They
it's
don't
horrid.
show the full picture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got contacted by the production company once,
Oh,
and
did you?
they wanted me to do some work with them, and they opened the conversation by saying, "We know you don't like us," and I said, it's not that I don't like you. It's the problem is this, is that for years gone by, women heard birth stories in the context of a loving family. And they heard one grandmother tell them about
Yeah.
a inverted commas horrendous experience, and then they heard another one talk about a wonderful home birth, and then another one talk about this struggle or that struggle or this positive outcome. But the information was always being delivered in a filial, a loving environment, wanting the
Yeah.
best. Now the problem is often all they hear about birth is on your program.
Yeah. I remember the first series was done in Southampton, which is where I trained, at Southampton, Princess Anne in Southampton. And the first, several series were filmed there. And I remember the first series. I used to. My husband wouldn't let me watch it because I'd be shouting and screaming at the telly.
Yeah,
In the first series, there was only one normal water birth, only one normal birth in the whole series, and all
yeah,
you see of the midwife is her gloved, with the great big gloves on, with the
yeah.
gloved arm. That's all you see of the midwife,
Well,
and that's
that's interesting, Shan, because I'll tell you, they did move on because I remember about 3 years ago reading a piece of research that had done an analysis of one of the later series, and
yeah,
they analysed the series for the proportion of births shown in relation to the modes of birth in the country.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
how many proportionally cesarean births, how many proportionally forceps births, blah, blah, blah. And they found this, which I found startling, that that series reflected similar proportions of
yeah.
types of birth on the series as we actually saw in the community. I
Oh
found it
wow.
hard to believe, but it did, right?
Well,
But the
okay.
thing that was and that was later series, Sharon, so it might well have improved. The thing that was more telling for me was that every consent moment was edited out.
Yeah, there's no consent. Yeah, you see them talking to a woman and her partner, and maybe the mum are all in the room, and the woman's on a ball. And then when they next go back to her, she's on a bed. She's got an epidural on. She's got fluids running through. She's got a
Yeah,
cannula, and
and
there's no explanation why.
all
What
the
happened?
consent moments edited
Yeah,
out.
what
And for
got her to
me,
that point?
and that has massive implications for a population who will then potentially go in hospital expecting every decision to be made by an authority. And it's
Yeah.
missing the point, really.
Well, listen, Mark, I could
A,
talk to you all day. Okay.
a
But I'm going to wrap
definitely.
it up. I'm going to wrap it up for now. So I just want to ask, what does the future look like for Mark? I know that you've talked about
See,
adding the extra chapters now, and you've
yeah.
talked. Is there
I,
anything else in the pipeline for Mark Harris?
well, yeah. I mean, the rest of my life now until retirement or death will be focused completely on birthing awareness 3-step process. I have a growing conviction that it's delivering benefit. The training itself is improving in terms of content,
Yeah,
and I am a little bit despondent, if I'm honest, Sharon, that I'm not generating more students. I'm getting to the point where I'm wondering what the, the evaluations of the training are amazing. The cost of the training comparable to other similar trainings is ridiculously good value.
It is, absolutely.
So I think for me, my frustration is a marketing frustration, but my passion is to train this as often as I can, because the feedback I get from women and men who are being taken through it by students is universally positive.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And in the main, people talk about transformational life experiences.
Yes.
And it's where I want to give my attention, to be honest.
Well, I'm a fan because I'm a
I
past
do.
student. I'm a past student and
I
an
do.
accredited practitioner now.
Yeah.
I loved every minute of it. You've inspired something inside of me, as you know. We've talked about
Yeah, we have.
other parts of NLP and meta stuff, so we're going to talk lots more about that. I love that you're adding language stuff into the book, which I think is fabulous. So, but for now, thank you so much, Mark.
Hey, I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks for listening to a Private Midwives podcast, everybody. To all the birthing mummies out there, I want you to remember to have faith, trust in your body. You've got this, okay? If you would like any information about Mark's projects that he's got, you can find the book. It's on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle or audiobook. I'm sure it's still in bookstores and things like that elsewhere. The Birthing Awareness 3-Step Rewind, you can find online along with Birthing for Blokes. With Private Midwives, you can go along to our website, which is privatemidwives.com. Our email, if you want to ask anything about any of our midwives or ask anything about the services that we offer. We have a huge range of services, obviously, and you can email at info@privatemidwives.com. We have an Instagram account, private_midwives, Facebook at Private Midwives, and TikTok as well. So do go along and have a look. If you've got any inquiries at all, just let us know. Again, thanks for coming along, Mark. I've loved every minute, as always, and I look forward to having you back again.